Good evening, everyone. Today we have a delight and a treat as our speaker. Parris Afton Bonds is a New York Times best-selling author of romance and adventure. She has been a dear friend to me and several other people. She was here, one of the first people that founded Southwest Writers many years ago, because she was part of a group that's now part of Romance Writers of America in founding the New Mexico chapter, and they discovered that a whole lot of people from other genres also wanted some help and advice. So they split off and became Southwest Writers. So she's been on with us from the beginning. These days, this is her latest book. She's been still, and that was 1989 or so when we first came about being. And so she's now living in another state. Actually, she lives in Mexico half the year and somewhere in the United States the other half. She was in Santa Fe for a long time. But, this woman has been a best-selling author for decades and has a lot of good insights into how to build a story. So we are feeling very, very grateful that she's taking the time this morning to share her advice on how to put together a book. From here, I'm just going to turn it over to Parris Afton Bonds.
Oh, thank you, Rose, so much. If only I could drive a backhoe like you do, or track money as you do for Southwest Writers, and most importantly, prepare slides like you did for today. And also, I want to thank the board of directors and just a huge thanks to the entire staff of Southwest Writers who make presentations like this possible for us. And just, hi everybody, happy holidays. Whether you're here in person or you're by Zoom attending, just welcome. And while we're on the theme of holidays, in my travels, two things. I got bronchitis, so if I sound like an ogre when I'm talking, bear with me. Also, I am hibernating right now for the holidays in one of my granddaughter's bedrooms. So as you can see, this is not the formal professional place I would like to say this is my office, but it's a messy bedroom. You should see the floor in here. But anyway, we're off and running. I guess one of the last things I want to say about the holidays is just to share my recipe with all of you for the holidays, and it's how to create an enthralling story. And since time has begun immemorial, and I think it's in the lead up here, writers have quibbled. What is more important, a story that is plot driven or a story that is character driven? And after more than 50 novels and 50 years of being a paid professional, well, not every time was I paid all this time, but after all this time, I have come to the firm belief that it is a strong plot that will fully develop a character. It is only in creating a tense, tight, taut plot that we can show her agonies, her ecstasies, her passions, her vices, her virtues, her frailties, her foibles. So I would like to show you the ingredients and share with you the ingredients that go into creating a tight, taut, tense plot today. And basically, they are about, and Rose, if you want to go ahead and go to the next screen, please. There we go. They're about the how and the why. The man who knows how will always have a job. The man who knows why will always be the boss. And just a disclaimer here, what I'm sharing with you today is not just what I've learned from other writers like you. It's not only from just my trials, and errors and my experiences as a writer of more than 50 years. But it's mainly that what I want to share today is from these two novels. And let's just talk briefly about them. The Techniques of a Selling Writer, and that's by Dwight Swain. Each of these I came across quite fortunately when I first began writing 50 years ago or more. And the Techniques of the Selling Writer, most of you it's basic, and most of you already know what Dwight is trying to impound here in your writer's brain. But occasionally there are glimmers that just go off and change your whole life course. And this happened for me in reading the Techniques of the Selling Writer. What was the how, and there are whys, but mostly from this book I got the hows, how to set up the enthralling plot here. And let's move on to Christopher Vogler, the writer's journey. Christopher Vogler and also George Lucas were both inspired by Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey and The Power of the Myth. And it is mainly through this second book that I want to show you the why we are doing this and how it creates the character's arc that will fully reveal the character. But first you have to have the plot. So what is a story? A story is simply how the main character deals with danger. And if Rose, if you could roll it again to the next, please. So, and it's quite simple here. You have the setup, you have the scene sequel, and you have the tension, which equals the all-important climax. And before I ever began the setup, though, and it's because I've been doing this for so long, I really have it ingrained with me. So when I have a great idea for a book that I want to do, I know that I must know 4 things. And one is the protagonist, and it can be an anti-hero. The second is the antagonist, and I'm going to pause here before I go to items number 3 and 4. Your antagonist is the most important character in your book. He has got to be as strong or stronger than your hero. You can't have contrivances working for your hero, but you can load up contrivances for your antagonist. One other thing I wanted to say here about the antagonist, he has to be a single character to duel it out with at the shootout at the OK Corral. It can't be, and I'm going to use Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid here, which I just watched recently. By the way, I'm in love with Robert Redford among many of the older generation here. But in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, they are escaping time and again, a newly formed posse, a group that is tracking them. And as good as they are at escape, Robert Redford and Paul Newman, they keep saying, who is this? How are they finding us? Who is this guy that's leading this group or this posse continually? And we have the loquacious Butch Cassidy saying, who is that guy? And our laconic Robert Redford, Sundance Kid, says nothing. He just keeps watching. And finally, we're getting here to the chase set up at the duel at the OK Corral. And Butch Cassidy asked that question again, and Sundance Kid says, that is Joe LaFleur. He can track a spider across the sand. So you want to have that one character in that final duel out at the OK Corral. Moving to number 3 of what I have, after more than halfway through about 35 books dumped into me, I know that I need to know the goals. And the goals are story goals here we're talking about. They can be the same goal or they can be mutually exclusive. But they have to be specific. You have to hit, or we have to hit the reader over the head with a hammer within, I would say, the first 2 or 3 pages with what is at stake here? What is the goal? Because if the reader doesn't know what's at stake, then they're going to toss the book. And especially now with so many ebooks out and given away free or for $1.99, if they're not going to have time, they'll just move right on to another book. So you want to be specific. For instance, I want to make love on Eiffel Tower. That's not specific enough. I want to make love on the Eiffel Tower on the 4th of July with fireworks going off. Still not specific enough. I want to make love with George Clooney on the Eiffel Tower. It could happen for an older woman here. So anyway, that is the 3rd, and then the 4th is, and you see on your page there, climax. We'll come to that later, but those are the 4 things I know now. But through at least half of my books, I had to have this set up. And next screen, please. Next slide, Rose. Thank you. So here for the setup are the 5 elements. Situation, what's the main plot? What's the hook here? Character, who's your main hero? And are they fighting for good? And it can be the pseudo-maniacal serial killer. And I'm going to pause here. I should have mentioned this earlier when I was talking about the antagonist. But 2 of the books that came out in the 70s featured the antagonist as the main character. And these books went on to become not only bestsellers, but they had films made of them. And I bring them up because you know, when I tell you these 2 books, if you were around in the 70s, you know already that they could not have happened. And one is, and one of my favorite authors is, I started to say Dwight Swain, Ken Follett, and it's The Eye of the Needle. And the other is, that came out in the 70s, was Frederick Forsyth's Day of the Jackal. And for instance, in the situation here, the Day of the Jackal, the main character, the antagonist, his goal is to assassinate Charles de Gaulle, President Charles de Gaulle. We know this never happened, and yet this is such a tense, tight, taut plot that you keep reading and you can't put it down. So you can have as your main character then the antagonist. The objective, of course, the antagonist here is wanting to assassinate de Gaulle. The opponent is the police detective, the French police detective. What's the big deal? Why should we care? And I'm emphasizing why again. How and why are going to develop your characters, but first the plot. So next screen, please. There we go. In setting up this template here, I went ahead and even though I had written the Brigands without setting up, because I already know it's ingrained in me, I went back and put this in for a template for you. So situation, penniless second son, Alex Paladin, protagonist, possesses only the family land grant in Tejas to his illustrious family baronial name. Situation, character, Alex Paladin. And I'm going to pause here. This is not necessarily always the way it goes. You could have the situation of, let's say, rich old Aunt Matilda has been confined to a Alzheimer's home by her greedy children. Situation, character, can her best friend Hilda, whatchamacallit, get her out of the Alzheimer's home? And the opponent is the masterminding, the greedy nephew, who is an attorney. So disaster. And we move on here. But opponent, I'm going back to my book, The Brigands, a mastermind secret agent for Santa Anna, Cabot Magnum, and Tejas Lane Commissioner, disaster. side with the Texican rebels, and Alex could lose not only his land grant, but his life. So if you could go on to the next slide, please. And here is where I want to make, this is what you really are aiming for when you're doing the setup. You're trying to get your story into a statement and a question. You want 2 sentences. So here is what I've developed. When penniless Alex Paladin is faced with keeping possession of the only thing left to him, his land grant in Tejas, he decides to take a stand and fight with the ragtag Texicans against the almighty forces of Santa Anna. Question: but can Alex outwit the evil, maniacal Cabot Magnum, who is hell-bent on not only gaining possession of Alex's precious land grant to create an empire of his own in Tejas, but determined to destroy Alex himself out of revenge for taking his beloved? So here is why I always strive for brevity in setting up the plot. Why do I do this? Because for me, it allows creativity, it allows spontaneity, it allows that rare moments of inspiration, because it's mostly perspiration. And what we're aiming for is the climax, which is the peak at the top of the mountain. And many paths can go up to that peak, the climax at the top of the mountain. And if you narrowed yourself in with a detailed plot of what has to happen, then you've maybe missed taking a path that gives you a breathtaking view, or a path that gives you a shortcut, and avoiding the threshold guardians of the antagonist. Also, what you're doing here is allowing for something you didn't see coming by making this a brief to a sentence and a question. And you'll think, oh, wow, I didn't see that coming. And so when the reader is reading that, they'll say, wow, I didn't see that coming. Now, one more point here on the statement and the question. A really good reason to be able to set this up before you begin developing your plot is that you can use this to submit to an agent or an editor, and they don't have time to read a lot. So if you've got it nailed down to this, you've got a better chance. What about the conferences you go to where you've got 5 minutes to convince an agent or an editor why they need to represent your book or buy your book? And this is the reason I always know the statement of where I'm going and the question. Now, having presented my side of why I want to convince you of a plot is more important, a plot-driven novel, I want to play the devil's advocate. And Rose mentioned, and I think it was more than 40 years ago, it's like probably 1886, as old as I am, but in 1986, 1987, the writers group, there were 4 or 5 or 6 of them who were meeting in homes, and pardon me, and I may be drinking water here with this bronchitis, they wanted to join a romance writers conference. And 2 of those, I want to mention them because they should be honored. One was Georgia McKinney and the other was Happy Shaw. But anyway, they asked me, and they asked Jude Devereaux to come and do a presentation to the group to get more people to join a chapter here. And I got to meet, and by the way, both of us, Jude also is from New Mexico, and we got to talking. And Jude shared with me that she could not type at that time anyway. And so she had to type handwrite her entire stories without typing. And her arm would get so swollen and so painful that she would have to wrap it in ice. And what she did share with me was that one of her novels was a 67-page long synopsis, the plot, the outline. And Jude is a highly talented writer, very successful, multiple times on the bestseller list. So my way isn't the only way, but we're going to discuss my way today. So next screen, please, Rose. Okay, so to the scene and sequel, and this is going to be creating the middle part of your story. And the scenes are like I have here the rebel cars, and they're linked by the sequels. And if you could roll it one more screen, I believe, one more slide here. So they're the peaks and valleys of our story. And on the scenes, you want your peaks, but you want them to keep getting higher and higher. But you need the sequel for the reader to rest as well. And you need the sequel, and I will get into that, why it's invaluable. But the functions of a scene are to provide interest and move the story forward. So the structure of a scene is goal, conflict, disaster. I'm going to come back to that in a second. The function of a sequel is to translate disaster into a goal, to telescope reality and control tempo. So the structure there of the sequel is reaction, dilemma, and decision. So in the sequels, I'm thinking of way back, even before my time, the Pearls of Pauline, and they were silent series movies. And she would get herself in a pickle, and it would stop at the end, and you'd have to come back next Saturday and pay your nickel to see the film. But she's hanging in the at the end of the movie, here at the sequel, by her fingertips. So that's where we get, one of the places we get the cliffhanger is. So let's just take, I'm making this up as we go along. Pauline is, let's say she knows of a treasure that will save her precious farmhouse from being repossessed. And she knows that it's buried in a small cave up on a cliff. And she cannot get to the cave by climbing. She has to go climb down because it's right near the top of the cliff. But it'll save the family farm there. So you see her, that's her goal. Her conflict is, do I go over the edge and climb down and I could lose my footing here? And disaster, she does. She starts slipping and she's hanging by her fingertips on one of the rocks. And so moving to reaction here, the sequel. What do I do? She's sweating, she's crying, she's yelling. Her dilemma, I've got to do something. Do I try to reach one of my foots out here to the peak closer to where the cave is? And it's beyond my stride, but do I take a chance of making that little small leap? Or do I grab this bush up above and maybe see if I can haul myself up? And that's her decision, her dilemma. And then she finally comes to the decision, well, I'm going to lose the farmhouse, so what do I do? And of course, here we go on to the next Saturday with, she makes the decision to take that step, but you don't know if she makes it or not. I want to go to one more thing about the sequel, why it is important, because it telescopes reality and it controls tempo. In this goal, conflict, disaster, the scenes, you have the main character. It's fast pace. They're being pursued out of a hotel room where they hope to gain plans, maybe to a board meeting. And they run to the elevator, and you're always showing, not telling. They run to the elevator. They're pushing the elevator button. Nothing's happening. They give up. They run to the stairs, and the stairs have been automatically locked because all electricity's been shut down. They run to the window. Can I jump? What should I do? So you have this fast pace and tightness of the scene. Now you need to slow down here because it's going to get, it's going to lack in belief. It's going to be, some credibility is, you're losing it here. So this slows it down. It gives the reader a chance to breathe. And you also want to telescope reality. Here is where you add your details. I'm thinking of, The Martian. I'm using a film here with Matt Damon. And you have this, he's going to Mars, the mission, the rocket's out of control. Nothing's working on the gauges, and just fast. And then he's finally on Mars. I have nothing. He's stranded. I have nothing to do. How am I going to feed myself? Reaction, dilemma, and then decision. Well, he starts, and here's where we have details. What does he do? Something prosaic. He starts growing potatoes. So this is just as important, your sequel, as is your scene. And one more thing on the sequel before we move on. You can have a sequel that sums up 30 years war in 3 paragraphs. What you want to do, though, is feature the dilemma. The main character, maybe he's lost his girlfriend. His reaction the first night maybe is to start drinking a lot, and then you see him for the next week, he can't sleep, and this is just a couple of paragraphs, but he's sleepless at night, he's drinking too much, he's walking the floors, he's late for work. What am I going to do? And then he makes a decision. I am going to change my life, I'm going to stop drinking, whatever, and I'm going to go after my girlfriend again as a new man. So enough there on the sequel. Next one, please. Okay, so scene and sequel. Here is tension. This is what it is all about, why you want the tense, tight plot. The beginning of a story, you create the tension. Middle of a story, you intensify it. End of story, you sharply focus it. So right here, let's go with the beginning of the story. You create the tension with a vital goal. And I want to emphasize the word vital. Vital comes from the Latin vita, which means life. And this is what has to be hammered in at the very beginning. What's at stake here? And it doesn't necessarily have to be a life or death situation, but it is vital to the main character. And one of the stories, it was a short story that just brought tears to my eyes, but it's about a boy who is slow of learning. He's around 12 or 13, and his mother really can't afford to keep him, and she's put him in a home for other kids who are also slow of learning. And he has maybe the capacity of a 6-year-old. And he wants dearly, his goal is for his mother to come and get him and take him home. And so at Christmas, he is creating this basket, and he goes outside, and you can see him making sure he picks the right stems, the brushes, the leaves, that he's creating this beautiful basket for her. And he's hoping that if it's beautiful enough that his mother will take him home. So vital goal there. What are the goals? Willa Cather said, by the way, there are only 3 plots. They're man against man, man against nature, and man against himself. But as far as the goals, there's the goal of possession. And of course, it can be the goal to possess the Holy Grail that heals the land. But it can be something as simple as the teenage girl who maybe is, she's living in a foster home that's really repressive, and she doesn't know her worth. And she sees in this store window this red dress, and it's not just any red dress. We're being specific here. It's got the red ruffles across it because she's flat bosom maybe, and it'll make her look better there. And she knows or feels that with this red dress that other people will recognize and see her for not just the wallflower here, and that the football hunk, the jockey, will ask her for the homecoming dance. So this is what she wants. I guess I ought to pause here in case I miss it later. When we get to the end and reward at the climax, we don't always give the main character what they want, because we all know that, you know, what our children want sometimes is not best for them. So we give them what's best for them. But we'll move on here to the goal of relief. And it's also the goal of escape. We have escape from Alcatraz. The Great Escape with Charles Bronson, and he's also someone that I want to make love with on top of the Eiffel Tower. We're moving along here. I want to mention here Thelma and Louise, but very, very important when you're doing the escapes. You want the hero, the main character, to be proactive. So in The Fugitive, it was for many seasons on TV. You have, I'm coming up short now on the main character there. If anyone knows, please shout out to me who the main character was. But he is on the run. I'll think of it. David Jansen, I know, played it in the movie. Kimball, Richard, was it Kimball? Anyway, he's on the run, trying to escape. And in the movie, Tommy Lee Jones, someone else I would like to make love with on the Eiffel Tower. He is after Richard Kimball, I think it is. Richard Kimball's on the run, trying to evade and elude Tommy Lee Jones. But at the same time, Richard Kimball is proactive. He's trying to track down the person who actually murdered his wife. And of course, Richard Kimball is being accused of it, but he knows it's a one-armed killer. So not only does this go through several seasons, but it is made into the film with Tommy Lee Jones. Okay, lastly, The Goal of Revenge. And this is the most difficult to write if you're going to choose it for a goal, because you're asking for the main character to go against the mores of society. If you're going to do this, you also really want to wrap it up with righting a wrong. I think that's all I'm going to, let me see if I've left anything out here. I think that's all. So if we could please go to the next slide. And I'll drink some water here. All right, so we've got the beginning of the story there, how we created it with goals. The middle of the story, intensify the tension. And you can do it here, complications, conflicts, opposition, confrontation. The one thing here you want to avoid is you don't want to be repetitive with any of these. So each of these has to loom larger and loom differently to the main character, because what you have then, when you get repetition, you get boredom. It seems like there's something else I was going to add there, but here's just something I'm coming through off the top of my head with the goals, conflicts, opposition, confrontation, to keep them different and to keep them getting larger. So let's say a couple boys are on their way to go fishing and they witness a murder. And the murderer sees them and he sets out after them and they start running. And they're scrambling through the underbrush to try to elude him. And then they come to this large tree and blocking them getting out of the underbrush. They were small and they have to climb over the trunk. So there's one, a little small complication. Then they keep running and they come to the river where they're going to fish. And now they've got to get across the river because they're locked in, they're boxed in here. And they start wading across it where it's more shallow, but the water is washing them away. Maybe one boy has to reach and save the other. So this is a different conflict looming larger. Then they come out onto the other side of the riverbank. And let's say it's just bare. There's nothing but, nowhere to hide. But there is a train track. All this has been cleared for a train. And by golly, here comes the train. Do they have enough time to, and here we have the dilemma, the decision, what do we do here? Now we're back to the scene in sequel. They're sweating it. They can hear the crunching behind them. Do we have enough time to beat the train across? Should we try to jump one of the box cars and ride with it? Should we both just turn around and confront the murderer and see by the two of us we can overcome him? So this is the dilemma, and then they make the decision, whatever it is. Next one, please. Sharply focus, then release tension. So this is based on easy path to goal versus disastrous alternative. And it's where you're forcing your main character to choose one of these two. And they're based on self-interest on the easy path to go versus principle on a disastrous alternative. So what you've set out with really here, we have the main character, we have his goal obstacle, and then we'll reach their surrender and get the reward that comes with our story. So next, please. I've got this is ingrained in every blood particle in my body and every bone. I hope you can remember this and go by it too, because it applies to our own life as well. One principle held high, regardless of race, gender, religion, whatever, is this: sacrifice for the sake of a larger issue is always, always worthy of a reward. And this is what we're going to base the tension that we're going to focus on with the climax. So next screen, please. Next slide. And I'm pausing here. If you will look at the top right here on this slide, you see climax all in red. And I'm laughing here because when Rose and she said, it's okay if I share this, when we were setting up the slides, since I couldn't be there in person, she was in her office with the door open and she was saying, okay, on the phone to me, Parris, I've got climax in red. And her husband was passing by the door and he just burst out laughing about the climax in red. So Rose, he's a keeper. He's one for the Eiffel Tower on 4th of July for you. Okay, so easy path to go. Why wouldn't you choose an easy path? It helps you, it's logical, you've got concrete facts to base it up, intelligence. On the other hand, if you choose, and why would you choose a disastrous alternative based on principle, emotion, abstracts like integrity, honesty, conscience, and truth? Here is where you focus your attention and you focus your main character. If you want them, if you want the HEA, happy ever after ending, to choose disastrous alternative. So I'm going to go through this with my Bobby, Robert Redford, one of the guys that's waiting for me on the Eiffel Tower there. And we're going through, use the film, The Natural. And I'm hoping I don't leave anything out here because it's really a perfect setup for getting to this climax. But Robert Redford, right up front, and in this film, he is portraying Roy Hobbs. And this film, by the way, is based largely on a true story that actually happened. He's portraying Roy Hobbs, and Roy Hobbs is a kid and is a teenager, always goes out behind the Nebraska farmhouse to the field to play catch and baseball with his father. Roy Hobbs is a natural. He's got all of the gifts that it takes to be a great baseball player. One day, lightning strikes and it kills his father, and it also withers the tree under which his father was standing. Roy takes a carving knife and he carves a baseball bat from the trunk of this tree, and he carves into the baseball bat Wonder Boy. And he continues, though, to practice. You see him practicing running around the bases, playing catch, and hitting and swinging, because he, right up front, he wants to be the best baseball player there is. That is set right at the front of the movie. He's 19. He leaves his sweetheart, Glenn Close, who is beautiful blonde, all in white. He leaves her behind to go to Chicago to try out for the Chicago clubs. And on his way on the train, he meets three people who will play in this setup that we're reading toward the climax. One is an insane female, and she has a fixation on one of the players for the Chicago clubs, but she's on the train. The other is she's played by Barbara Hershey. The other is a sports writer played by Robert Duvall. And the third is, he's called the Whammer, but it's based on Babe Ruth, really. And on the train, Robert Redford, Roy Hobbs, let it be known that he wants to be the best ball player there is. He gets to his hotel room and he's naive, and this is in Chicago from the night before the tryouts. And the insane young woman who has the fixation on one of the club's players contacts him and says, I have information you need to know. And she wants to come to his hotel room. And naively he says, okay. She gets to his hotel room and she shoots him with the rifle. And he, in truth, and what really happened, he almost dies and he never plays again. But in the movie, Robert Redford is seriously wounded, and 19 years go by. And here is where 19 years may be wrapped up in a sequel. Maybe he's drinking again. I really can't remember all of that movie, but maybe he's unsatisfied with his job, and you just see him pacing and not happy. 16 years go by. He's 35. What does he do? He has this dilemma. He says, I'm wasting my life. What do I have to lose? I'll go ahead and try out. There's a tryout being held in New York and this movie is full of metaphors, with the New York Knights, Knights. And he brings his bat, the Wonder Boy, and he shows up to try out, and he's signed on. The manager of the New York Knights is furious. His name is Pops, because first, Bobby, Roy Hobbs, is 35. He's too old to be playing. Second, the manager, Pops, suspects that the major owner of the New York Knights, the judge, who is in the movie always in black, is up to something, some no good trick, because if the New York Knights don't achieve a pennant this year, then the judge, who is the major owner now, per the contract, can own all of the New York Knights. So Pops is a little suspicious there, but he's got Robert Redford signed on, and he benches him, doesn't want to use him. However, one of the batters becomes ill, and so Robert Redford is summoned to pinch hit here. And by golly, the first time he hits the ball, he knocks the wrapping of the cover off of the ball and drives in home, a homer. From that time on, they went time and time and time again. And you would think that Robert Redford would deserve a reward, because he's shown beyond a shadow of a doubt. He's given his all, practicing everything he has here. And he does have a little slump when he starts dating the beautiful daughter of Pops. But he comes out of the slump when he receives a phone call from Glenn Coast, the love of high school sweetheart, love of his life. And she says she's in New York, and he meets with her at a diner, and she tells him that she has a son and she's come to visit his father in New York. And that's that. But from then on, she tells him, she says, you're really an incredible player. And so he's back on track, and they start winning again, and they get to the playoffs with the Pittsburgh Pirates. And here we're coming to driving home the focus and the relief, and making Easy Path to Go versus Disastrous Alternative Choice for Robert Redford. They're winning. They're in the playoffs for the pennant, and after one of the games, the parties, Robert Redford collapses from the wound he received from the shot from the rifle 16 years before. And they call it the silver bullet. And in metaphor, the silver bullet is the magical cure-all for everything. But he is severely wounded. He goes to the hospital. He's in the hospital for 3 days. In those 3 days, and don't you like it that the 3 days are also like the 3 days when Christ was on the cross, the black period. In these 3 days that we've set up, let me see where I am. So we have come to him, the judge, and the judge is all in black and he's sitting in the corner there, and he says, Robert Redford, if you will throw the game, if you will not play in the playoffs here, this last game, it's down to 1 game now, I'll give you $5,000. And in those days, $5,000 was like I think $92,000 or $97,000. Oh, that's over there on self-interest and logic, concrete facts. Does that not make sense? But just to add an incentive, he says, Robert Redford, if you'll throw the game, I won't show the incriminating photos and articles from 16 years ago when the woman was in your hotel room. Well, if you know baseball, it's the All-American game. That's the hero. You would not ever want to have any kind of discrepancy here thrown on the hero in a compromising position. Third, a doctor tells him, if you play, it could be fatal. So here we have everything lined up on easy path to go. Why in the world would you ever choose a disastrous alternative? Unless you're a man of integrity, unless you're a person, a woman of integrity. And unless, like the All-American game, you've learned that you play it for the team. You're a team member. So despite all that, he suits up and goes out the next day. Here is where we're focusing. He gets up to bat. It's the last inning. It's tied. And he gets up to bat. Strike one. Black, black, black. And here I want to focus. You want it black when you're focusing this final scene of your climax. It's like Jesus on the cross. It was black for 3 days and the earth trembled. So black, 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 strike one. Then the pitch is thrown again and he swings and it's another strike. Oh, shoot. And worse, to make it worse, and you always make it worse, black, 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 blacker, he's got blood coming from his side there on staining his uniform. The pitch is thrown again. And what could be worse but his bat, Wonder Boy, breaks. And Bobby Savoy runs up to him. Now, I've left this out. During this time when he was with the Nets leading up to this playoff game, he taught little Bobby Savoy how to carve a bat. And Bobby called it the Savoy Special. Well, Bobby runs up, he's the bat boy, and he runs up with a bat and he says, here you go, Mr. Redford, here you go. And Robert Redford says, no, he says, I want your bat, the Savoy Special. So little Bobby Savoy's just thrilled, and he gives him his bat. And the pitch is thrown again, and oh, I'm left out one important thing here. So sorry. While he's in the dugout, Robert Redford, Glenn Coase sends him a note, and she says she's in the stands with their son, and it's their son. So I left that out. Sorry about that. And so he gets up. He's got the Savoy Special. It's black. Final pitch here. Swings, and he knocks with that ball. He knocks the baseball into the lights, the stadium light, and they're going off just like sparkles, just like the 4th of July, just like me on top of the Eiffel Tower with George Clooney. But that's not all. The ball hits the lights and it bounces back and it hits the announcer's box where Robert Duvall, who's been trying, he kept saying, I know who that is, trying to remember who Robert Redford is, because he would have a great story here about the compromising position, hits him in the forehead. Oh. In this, you see Robert Redford running around base. Everyone is cheering and lights are going off, and Glenn Coase stands up and she's all in white and she's haloed. So there you have his reward, because we do this because there is always someone smarter than we are. There is also always someone faster than we are. There's always someone richer, someone more talented. So this is why we set up the easy path to go versus disastrous alternative at this all important climax. This determines beyond a shadow of a doubt that our main character deserves the reward.
Paris,
Yes.
we're just about done on time. We can go over a little bit, just wanted to let you know.
I'll wrap this up then. And just to wrap this up, so at the end of the movie here is the credits roll. You see Robert Redford playing baseball in the field with his son, and you know that not only he achieved, Robert Redford, the best baseball player ever, but he's passing this on, his legacy, to his son. And just if you want to scroll to the next one, and we'll wrap it up. And here, Rose, I thought I wouldn't be able to talk for 35 minutes, and I'm going to be. I apologize. I want to encourage you to read The Writer's Journey by Chris Vogler, because here you see the outline of the plot on the hero's journey, and then you see the character arc. I said that the man who knows how will always have a job. The man who knows why will always be the boss. So this completely develops the character arc, and you'll see why it's done this way. And I'll wrap it up now here. So sorry I went over.